Hello, everyone. Hope you all are doing great. Welcome to our today's session of Meet the Global Leader. This session is all about inviting international professionals to share their journey of their professional career from their student life, what they've been doing so far, their insights, skills development, skills implementation, and some how to overcome challenges, importance of having mentors for students mainly, and also some advice for students who are actually our main audience of this webinar. So our main audience, they're actually university going students from 19 to 24 at their age. So the objective of this webinar is to share some guideline, insights, and professional experiences so that they can design their career roadmap before their graduation. So we have invited Miss Siobhan today. She is Chief Operating Officer of Australian Computer Society, and it is our pleasure to have her with us, a seasoned COO, board director, and passionate advocate for innovation and leadership. With a rich background in finance, logistics, and education, she has built a remarkable career spanning over 25 years with experience in strategic partnerships, problem solving, and mergers and acquisitions. She's a highly accomplished professional with a strong track record of driving business growth and development. So, in this webinar, she's going to share her insights and experiences on leadership, innovation, and her journey as a global professional. So, Ms. Shubhan, welcome to our session. How are you doing?
I'm very, very well. Thank you so much for having me and inviting me on the show.
Thank you so much for your time. Actually, like impressive, diversified background you have. It is
Yeah.
going to be a pleasure to for our students to learn from you and to get some guidance as well. So,
Yeah.
like as our audience are university going students, if you share about a little briefly about your university life and how was it, and what inspired you to pursue a career in the finance and logistics sector, and how did you develop your operational and people strategies, and how, if you connect those through your student life.
Oh wow. Well, that's a really big question, so I'll give it a shot. So when I was in my last few years of school, I had a career advice that potentially I would be ideally suited for a career in hospitality management. And I pursued that as my first qualification, a degree in hospitality management, and worked in food and beverage and restaurants. And then after graduating, just 6 months after graduating, I realized I didn't want to have a family, shall we say, in 10 years' time and have to balance family with a hospitality career. So I changed careers completely and started a second degree at night whilst I worked in human resources and industrial relations. And I did that for 5 years in the evening and graduated for the second time at 27. And then I had a short stint working in Ireland. I moved to Ireland. My mother and father are Irish, if you're recognizing my name, and lived with aunties and uncles and worked at Guinness. And then I returned to Australia to do my Masters of Business Administration. So I graduated for the third time at 32. And in all of that time, I had not worked in finance. It was only at about 32 that I moved into the what's called the third-party mortgage space in Australia. So I don't think I started with an aspiration to work in finance, but what do they say? Money makes the world go round. It's pretty hard to avoid it in many opportunities, and I've always followed what good roles, good opportunities. I've often heard myself say, doing good stuff with good people is generally a good indication that I'll say yes to an opportunity.
Great. As you know, like students, after graduation, especially in Bangladesh, as we are a developing country, in most
Mm,
cases, students having different background from different majors, they find it, me as well, a little bit difficult to like connect academic studies with
mm,
what we do in general in professional sector in the beginning of our career journey.
mm,
So, how was it for you? Like when you first started
mm,
your career,
mm.
how did you actually adapt initially if you faced the similar thing that the gap
Yeah.
between academic studies and professional, uh, career?
Yeah, starting work. Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. And for me, with my first qualification, it was a little bit different because I suppose I planned in advance. I knew that I was passionate about working in hospitality. So during my last 2 years of school, I started short courses in cookery, service, silver service, which is using cutlery to pick up food at a table, if anyone on the call is familiar with that. So when I graduated and I was working in hospitality, it was very much a seamless transition. Now, differently with human resources, my second degree, I initially secured a role as an admin officer in HR, and I didn't know anything really about the opportunity. I understood it in research terms, but I hadn't worked in it. So I was really spending a lot of time observing, looking at those working in my team, seeing how they did things, asking lots of questions, not suggesting I knew anything, and yeah, really watching and mirroring and thinking about things and researching it until I got a bit more comfortable. So yeah, you've got to get into the role. A little bit different in Australia as well. It's very common for younger people in Australia to have a part-time job when they're able to work at about 15 or 16. So I had some lived work experience from when I was quite young. So I'd always had a part-time job throughout my study and my schooling. So there was a little bit of confidence, shall we say, in answering telephones or organizing meetings or bringing stakeholders together.
Great, and that's the thing to mention. Like another point that yeah, in our country, or maybe common in somewhere else. If you, say, for example, study finance, you cannot start your career in marketing, HR, supply chain. So these kind of misconceptions are there. So
Mm.
uh, all through your career, how um, what your experiences as a like admin and HR, how those learnings actually helping you all through your professional journey.
So I'm a big advocate of saying yes to opportunities, and I'm talking about yes to volunteering at a soup kitchen. I'm saying yes to opportunities to help someone move a house, uh, anything, because in all of these situations, you're interacting, you're speaking to people, you're learning about people, you're learning about their lives and their situations. And I think that that broadly informs and educates you as a person. And I'm a big advocate of that. I've done that throughout my entire life. Excuse me. I also have a strong background in martial arts, which has taken me in all different areas from a sporting perspective. So yeah, I think the more you engage in the things that are happening around you, the more chances you have of learning about society and not just work, but how people operate and how people think. And I think that's bode very well for me in my career. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. And
That's okay.
like in case of like the person, the role you have today,
Mm,
like chief operating officer. So being a CXO, it's very so many things you have to do. So all through your different roles that you have been so far.
mm.
So if you share some key points on skills in your professional career, the key skills that you have been working on and you have been implementing. So
Yeah.
if you share few of the key skills and how those skills actually have been implementing by you in different roles, that would be very helpful for students to understand how what skills are very crucial.
Yeah, I think with my passion for running and operating businesses, I knew I wanted to do that from a younger age. And I think there's probably many people on the call today that probably believe the same or have the same aspiration. When you think about business skills, they're quite diverse and quite broad. So I thought about what was most critical to success in an organization. And from my research, the biggest differentiator is people, the talent within your organization. You can replicate price, you can replicate product, you can replicate service. to a lesser degree. So the way your team operate and perform in an organization is the number one biggest differentiator. And it's probably no surprise that that is a big passion of mine, given I have a hospitality and a HR background. Everything for me is around people and people leadership and people transformation, helping the organization achieve its goals. So that was my first, I suppose, area of focus and my natural leaning. And I also realized that was a natural area that I thrived in. And then when you think about any organization, you need to have good strength in financials. You need to understand the profit and loss and the balance sheet. You need to understand marketing. You need to understand tech. So then I started to work on the areas in my natural skill set that perhaps weren't as strong as others. It's almost like a skill wheel. You've got to have a little bit of talent in all areas. It's very limited that people can be great in all aspects of business leadership, but knowing what ones you want to develop and learn more about, that was definitely a keen focus for me. It was always about continuing to learn and continuing to stretch myself and putting myself in situations where I was uncomfortable. So I'm a big advocate of being comfortable with being uncomfortable, particularly as adults. We get into that, and probably again, not for students because you're still in that very steep learning curve. But when you get into your career, it's easy to say, oh, I'm really good at this when you're 30 or 35. And I know this job like the back of my hand. And I've intentionally changed industries, sectors, continuing to challenge myself. So I have a very well-formed set of skills now at this point in my career.
And you have mentioned that in changing industry,
Mm.
you were a lecturer.
I
Uh,
have. I still lecture. Yes.
and in the beginning of your career, and then you also worked in project management and HR and stuff. So I also mentioned that as a business leader, you have to have some skills or some knowledge on like tech, marketing, and supply chain or so many stuff. So like especially business graduates, when
Mm,
we hear about technology, we have to learn
mm,
something related to tech as a developing country, it's immediately pose challenges that
mm.
technology I can I'm a business graduate, I'm studying business, I cannot code, I cannot learn the
Nor can
complex the
I. Quick
misconception.
secret. Nor can I.
Yeah. So in that case, how also the advancement in technology that the world
Mm,
is going forward with and adopting this advanced technology.
mm,
So how especially business graduates
mm,
can should do to
mm.
adapt or cope up or with this ever changing and advancement of technology, business
Yeah.
dimension has been changing. So in terms of skills and
Mm,
knowledge development, if you share some of your advice, especially for business graduates, how they should cope up or in terms of skills and
yeah.
knowledge.
Yeah, look, I mean, you're spot on. It's really hard to do that. And I'll give you I suppose, a case in point. We all understand tech is moving fast. If you look at household brands, and perhaps I will use brands that hopefully are globally known, but forgive me if they're not. But the the rate of adoption is measured in how fast it takes a tech brand to reach 100,000 customers. And if you look at the history, it's taken Netflix 10 years, Facebook 4.5 years, TikTok 9 months, and generative AI 60 days. So that is probably a great example of the rapid rate of change and the rapid rate of adoption of different tech around the world. So in balance to that, how do you keep abreast of the things that are happening? It's number one, it's really hard. It is really hard. And that's one of the biggest challenges for any organization, particularly CEOs, is what is the future, what's the next 3 to 5 years look like for our organization, and how do we best adapt to the potential future trends or changes? What do? I definitely subscribe, to podcasts, to emails, and I particularly do them outside of Australia. I try and pick global, newsletters or high consumption newsletters where they have lots of different tech updates and tools. I also intentionally in Australia meet with at least one person a week that is particularly outside of a core task I'm trying to achieve in that week. So again, with business, with study, like with university, I'm thinking most students got in to do their study, worked in their teams, wrote their essays, submitted their assignments, but rarely did they look up and have a peripheral stretch, like look to the left, look to the right, what's happening around me, unless they were genuinely very curious. I try and do that once a week in my job. That could be the form of a coffee, it could be a video chat, it could be a conversation via email with somebody, completely like in tech, of course, because that's my passion point, but not related to the tasks I'm trying to complete that week, because I'm generally interested in what problem are you solving with your business, and potentially how does that relate to what I'm thinking about. And sometimes it doesn't have any correlation, but interestingly, in a year or 2 years, I'm often reflecting on the businesses that I meet, how they're solving problems, and by just general extension, that helps broaden my mindset and understanding and how I might solve problems in our organization. So I think number one and foremost, it's be curious, and be curious outside your natural territory or area. Super important. So, I mean, I'm aware of, not that it's when it first happened, I was very aware of it when Estonia became an e-government. Now, Estonia from Australia, it's a really long way. I've never traveled to Estonia, but I was keenly watching how their government, which is governments often struggle with adopting technology. They're often behind private organizations. So that to me was really an interesting case study in Estonia as a case in point.
Absolutely. There are so many great things, like startup e-visa, and it's 100% digital country. It's an
Mm.
amazing thing. So, as a COO, if you share briefly about Australian Computer Society, what it
Mm.
does, how, according
Yeah,
to you, it is creating impact,
yeah.
like in the community, and also after that, if you share your day-to-day operations, or your day as a COO in general, what you do
Yeah.
as a COO.
Okay, so we're 58 years young in Australia with the Australian Computer Society. We've been around a really long time. We are a not for profit, and we are a representative body, professional body for individuals in the tech sector. So if you're an engineer in Australia, you belong to Engineers Australia. In Australia, if you're a tech representative, you belong to the Australian Computer Society. And what does that mean? We create content around for events. We create content for continual professional development. We do white papers. We work closely with the government. And we also have two major streams of work with the Australian government, which is in relation to the skills assessment of anyone coming to Australia based on their tech qualifications. And we also help administer the professional year program for international students choosing Australia as a destination for their career. So that would be the main pieces. What does my day look like? So the ACS is quite a large organization, about 250 staff, of which a large proportion, not directly, but indirectly report to me. And I'm going to give a sporting analogy, which is very Australian, and I'm probably not going to give a cricket analogy, which I think is quite big in Bangladesh. But the idea is, passing the footy down the paddock, kicking the ball. Maybe a soccer analogy is best. If my team continually can run down the field unimpeded to continue to progress the work that they're doing, my job is to advocate, remove obstacles, solve problems, help them clarify decision making, engage the right stakeholders, give them clarity. So I find myself running, shall we say, interference in many ways, in a good way. So to help my team continue to achieve the tasks they have collectively, and ideate on solutions that we identify or come up with, but also identifying new business streams, new business opportunities, new products, new services for our existing members and future members.
Great. And you are also worked as a director of Scale Ups and Innovation Labs. So, if you share your thought on, why it is so important to have innovation lab for universities, according to your experiences.
Yeah, look, innovation, what they say is about 10 to 12% of the population that are genuine entrepreneurs that can generally see problems and then work towards solving that problem. We all see problems every day in our life. and new opportunities we think about, but we rarely, as the average person, go ahead and try and start a business to solve that problem. So I do think innovation spaces and innovation or collective areas where entrepreneurs and their teams can coalesce are really, really beneficial. I mean, you get, and I've worked in them for years in my career in different roles. You just have a collective optimism, a collective problem solving and growth mindset, which is really empowering. Uh, but I think when it comes down to the brass tacks, future entrepreneurs need to be very clear on what is the problem you're solving, who is going, when you find the problem, what is the solution that you're going to create to solve that problem? How scalable is that solution? How easily replicated could that product be? So who could easily disrupt the business you're creating in 2 or 3 years, that perhaps an incumbent in a particular vertical? And then who desperately wants to buy the product? Because if you have someone thinks it's a good idea, maybe it's nice, that's not a huge motivation to hand over money to buy something. But if they desperately need your product, I think those bouncy balls, you tend to be in a good recipe. And then it comes down to the motivations of the founder. In my experience, founders that are looking to be an entrepreneur or looking to make money, those motivations tend not to sustain your, I suppose, needs 3 years into a business where you're working 7 days a week and have been for 3 years. You can't pay your bills. You're facing challenges. Being rich or being notable as an entrepreneur are no longer adequate enough to sustain that effort that requires you to generally continue to plow away at an entrepreneurial venture. So I think generally having a real passion for the problem you're solving is, or in my experience, has been the main driver of unrelenting success.
Yeah, talking about like business and challenges. So like this kind of misconceptions and people sharing so many challenges about doing business is pose like hindrance to think about starting or trying with ideas and starting a
Mm,
business, especially for students. So,
mm.
what advice would you give to students who are interested in starting their own businesses, and what resources do you recommend for entrepreneurs?
It's a great question. So I know when I was at university, my first course, I put in a grant to open my own restaurant, and I was, absolutely convinced at that point in time that I knew everything about operating my own venture. And what is the adage? Ignorance is bliss. Because I look back and reflect on those days and generally understand that I didn't have a fully formed perspective of what it took to do that. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean there aren't many people at a university level that come up with great ideas. That's actually more often not true than not. What the difference is between a good idea and university students are generally very good at the market research required to understand whether a product could go to market in any sustainable way. Again, tick. Some of the challenges we see in the domestic market in Australia is the ownership of IP. So there's a great adage in business that says start with the end in mind. So when you start a venture, many people want to raise capital. Many people think about the idea of IPOing, listing on a stock exchange. If the ownership of the IP is from the university or beholden to a difficult structure, that is going to be prove difficult down the track. So you need to understand, if you have an aspiration to start something, how would you possibly exit that venture? That needs to be a consideration early, because when you're setting up the right legal structures for that venture, you need to be mindful of what that will look like in time to come. I think it would be very beneficial for university students to balance, like I talked about, their skill sets with the right skill sets around them. So in Australia, we see a lot of people creating advisory boards, not a board of directors, but advisory boards that can have a very, very small amount of equity for no cash. Normally the structure is for 2 years worth of effort, 2 hours a month. Those key board advisors providing insight, introductions, governance to the business. And you might form that with 3 or 4 more seasoned professionals to the student to help, but you've got to be very clear about what are the gaps in my knowledge and skills. And it's often legal. Legal's a big one because legal costs a lot of money normally in any business structure. It could be finance. If you're a tech founder, a tech student, or a tech entrepreneur, you might feel that finance skills is not where your strength is. So potentially having a board advisor that can bolster that skill set for you. So be really quite clear about what am I trying to solve? What skills do I generally not have strength in? And then how can I try and find the right people to help me make my business venture a success?
Great, very insightful. And as you mentioned, that advisor board, what do you think about mentorship, especially for
Yeah.
students and for professionals? If you suggest how students should choose a mentor and how a
Mm.
mentor can help to go a long way.
So I think mentorship, in a broad term, I don't have consistent mentors per se, but I have lots of people in business I have conversations with on a regular cadence. So potentially you would call it an informal mentorship program where I see skills or capability or experience in these stakeholders where I feel that they are more accomplished or more capable in certain areas than myself, and or they're amazing leaders. So knowing what you're looking to develop, I think, is super important. From my perspective, my leadership style is very much around being very egalitarian. We're one team, we've got one goal, we can learn something from everybody. Just because somebody has had a month's worth of experience and a degree does not preclude them from contributing meaningfully in a team conversation. So I have had exposure to people that have been quite notable in their corporate career, but don't seem to have a similar ideological lens that I do when it comes to people. They think highly about, a hierarchy, and juniors should not speak in meetings, and I don't subscribe to that viewpoint. I think the more diverse a team, the more diversity of thought you have, the more successful your business could be. So for me, my experience has been trying to find people that you have the same values first and foremost. And then from that, what you're looking to, I suppose, deepen in your own skill set, whether it be personally or professionally or both, and then having consistent conversations with those people, nurturing those relationships. But you need to drive it. I've got to say, in my experiences, I've had a number of people reach out to me, and I 9 times out of 10 say yes. But the second statement I send back is, I have a mentoring approach, or would you like to suggest one? And they either take A or B. I said, okay, great. I'll leave you to organize the first meeting. I would say 20% have been motivated to organize the first meeting. And I find that really telling. So the idea obviously comes to different individuals at different times, maybe after an event, after a conference, after a video presentation like this. And they think, oh, that's a great idea. But there's no sustained effort. And like your own career development, mentoring, it needs to be driven by the individual.
Absolutely thoughtful. And speaking about leadership style, as you have mentioned, how do you actually encourage innovation and
Mm.
creativity within your teams, and what strategies do you use to foster a culture of experimentation?
Yeah. Great question. So I often, in Australia, we call it diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I know that's a term used more globally as well, but that's something that's very much ingrained in my mind. And the way I think about it, the analogy I would use would be diversity, as an example, would be the same as being invited to a party. You can be invited to something. And that's fine. That's great. You've got a diversity of people, but inclusion is being asked to dance. So that sense of, I'm not only here, but someone's asking for my opinion, my contribution in a meeting. And in my experience, I've had different teams over my career, and some people tend not to be effusive or motivated to put their hand up. They're actually culturally perhaps not thinking that they should speak proactively, which is much more common in Australian business environments. And what I found myself doing with those stakeholders in my team is, sort of saying, hey, Mandeep, what did you think of John's comment? Do you think that he had, from your role in the organization, do you think there's some merit to what John's suggesting we do, or do you not think it would work? So rather than putting to somebody, tell me your new idea, it's more asking them to have a perspective on someone's shared idea. And that has been successful to me. It hasn't made someone feel uncomfortable about having to be put on the spot to come up with an initiative, shall we say, or contribute something new. But 9 times out of 10, most people are comfortable saying, actually, I think what John said is pretty good. And then I've found in my role, I've seen these issues, and I think what John's saying would mitigate or converse, the opposite to that. So I definitely think we need to be mindful of having those people in our team is one thing, and that's not always fortunate to have a mixed and varied team in ethnicity and in age, in a whole range of aspects. But we also need to ensure that we're seeking out their contribution to the ideas that we're forming to make sure that it is diversity and inclusion. So that would be a big part of that. What was the other part? Sorry, you asked. Forgive me.
Well, I mean, culture of experimentation.
Oh, yes, of course. So it's interesting because in Australia, our laws don't easily facilitate an idea of experimentation. The idea is you can't fail, you can't become a bankrupt. If you become a bankrupt, you can't then be a director for 7 years. So, and I understand those laws. I mean, we don't want people being renegade with businesses and people's money, of course. So you need to do smaller experiments. Or obviously have enough data to tell you that what you're trialing is not going to bankrupt the organization. But it's also simple things. It's micro things like, you can't castigate someone, you can't punish somebody, you can't criticize them for trying something they genuinely thought was a good idea for the organization or for the team, and they didn't land it. That's okay. You got to. I mean, the adage in startups is fail fast. You've got to allow those team members to experiment in a controlled manner with not a high risk of financial loss, and congratulate them for having a perspective or an assumption they're trying to prove out. Often in business is about, I assume if we do this, we'll get that. If I do A, I'll get B, and you go, okay, great. Sounds like a possibility. Let's try it. And you try and measure it in the smallest possible increment. That could be a day, it could be a week, but you don't want to leave the incremental measure of 6 months, because in 6 months your business could be, in a different position financially. So it is being mindful of the culture in the organization, and what you demonstrate and what you lead. And even as an individual, showcasing that you make mistakes, that we're all fallible, we're all human. And if those in your team make mistakes, it's not something to hide, it's something to share so we can collectively learn from. That's definitely what I've tried to create in my team anyway. Not always easy in a broader organization unless you're the CEO, but it's definitely my aspiration because, as I said, we're all human. We don't land everything all the time correctly.
Definitely. And according to you, how universities can actually um, initiatives on like talent development program, or programs like doing experimentation with business ideas. So if you
Hmm.
suggest some initiatives for universities that they can take to guide. So our main objective, one of the main objectives is to do different things before graduation, because after
Hmm.
graduation students are kind of vulnerable, that whether they want to explore professional career or start a business. I don't have the skills, stuff like that. So for universities, if you suggest some initiatives for students if they want to pursue professional career, what are the programs they can run apart from their academic activities, and for students with entrepreneurial mindset, what are the programs they can initiate, like innovation lab stuff?
Yeah, so I think, as I said before, there's a range of problems people see every day in their life, and if you're an individual that never sees problems, then potentially you're far away from being an entrepreneur. But I think as a genuine DNA of an entrepreneur is seeing problems nearly all the time in business experiences that you think, gosh, if they did that, that would be a really great experience, and more people would buy that product. So I think from a university perspective, you need to, well, it's possible for universities to either go out to organizations saying, what problems are you trying to solve? You know, have a pin board, have a, you know, a website landing page where they can share with the university, this is a real problem we're trying to solve, and share it across the university sector and say, well, if you come up with a great idea, we're happy to partner with you and work on it. And it could just be a pitch a problem, problem pitch, whatever you want to call it. That could be an easy one to, you know, it requires a student to do the heavy lifting and research the problem in more detail, which is that extra effort that entrepreneurs make when they try and, I suppose, identify opportunities in the market that they can go to market and sell a widget, sell a product, and be successful in doing that. So for me, from an entrepreneurial point of view, that would be an idea. I think from a corporate perspective, in a more traditional stream of you know, graduation into corporate, in Australia, we have lots of capstone projects. Is that a common thing in Bangladesh? Capstone projects, where it's like an industry-given problem. It could be a marketing plan, it could be a website, it could be financial analysis, and you sign a non-disclosure agreement and you share the problem with the students in a group, a cohort, and the team, the student team need to, I suppose, generally work on a real business problem. It's called a capstone assignment. So there's a lot of that in Australia where universities do partner with organisations with smallish, you know, not overly demanding problems, and you do meet with the student cohort every fortnight, and then they present back to you on what they believe from their research is the way to tackle that problem or solve that analysis.
Amazing. I mean, this is a great idea, like to collaborate with industries and, like put them in the real like scenario and,
Mm,
like solve challenges. Nice. Definitely. It's a very great idea that universities should promote. And if when you hire
mm,
as we are almost at the end of our session, when
yeah.
you hire like graduates
Mm.
especially, what skills you look for in them, and other what are the knowledge base that you also seek?
So I'm going to be a little bit controversial on this one, and it's probably not great for students that are listening that are working so hard on their degree, and I understand the effort and the time. But interestingly, when you do graduate, you're similar to everyone from school, similar to everyone that graduates, you have a degree. So what is your point of differentiation? And when it comes to recruitment for me, I'm always looking for a growth mindset. I'm looking for attitude. And I've often heard myself, I suppose, describe it as attitude is the only amplifier. You might be the smartest person at university, but if your attitude is a fixed mindset and you know everything already, that's not something I can kind of work and develop and bring into my team because, you know, you're already fully formed, you know everything. So those that have you know, attended university but have a really curious mindset and a real willingness to learn and adapt and you know, try new things, it to me is the most amazing mindset you can have, because you can't teach behavior is innate. So if you're not a motivated, self-motivated, interested, curious individual, I yeah, a degree to me is okay, tick, you've got that. I don't look at the marks you achieved personally myself. I look at more your attitude and your willingness to start to learn. You know, there's lots of different things in business that don't require every subject you finished in your degree, but it does require you to think differently. It does require you to work in a team. It does require you to ask questions with confidence. They're the qualities I look for. So it is all the personal or non-technical skills, shall we say. But first and foremost, it is a very strong growth mindset.
Great. Overall, like a common sense, like soft skills and common sense to
Yeah,
be achieved. Hard skills can be taught. So
yeah.
yeah, this is a very great advice, and like this is very a big gap among students. Like to especially when they enter into professional sector, common sense is very important skill
Mm,
as well,
mm.
especially like in terms of us. So Miss Shubhan, thank you so much
That's
I
okay.
hope I'm announcing it your name correctly. So thank you so much for like out of your busy time, you have shared your journey in brief, and also some advice for universities and students as well. And if
Yeah,
anyone wants to be an entrepreneur, what are the things they should consider before start their own venture, and some of your lessons, advice
yeah.
with students. Thank you so much for that. On behalf of School
That's
of
okay.
Entrepreneurship Development, yep.
Again, in Australia, we use LinkedIn a lot for business. I know in different cultures and different countries they use different tools. So if anyone is on LinkedIn, happy for them to reach out and give me a shout out and give me a message, and I will endeavour to respond.
Thank you so much for that. And definitely, it's a great way to connect, because
Mm,
people with when they have a very great and impressive experiences, and to learn from them is a blessing, and it's a great
mm,
opportunity. We also would like to invite students, especially from Bangladesh, or entrepreneurs, professional, to seek guidance from
absolutely.
you, mentorship, and definitely to reach out.
Always
And
happy to
thank you
help.
so much. Thank you so much for
I,
your
I
time.
have a
And
I will
yeah.
hopefully have a upcoming trip to Bangladesh.
Oh, great! Great! It's a great opportunity,
Yeah,
and definitely, if you come to Bangladesh, if you want, we can organize programs for
yeah,
students in universities in person. So
oh,
definitely, we'll look up for that as well.
that'd be amazing. All right, well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for your time, and have a good day.
No worries. Bye bye.
Bye.